The Clips releasing their first album in 16 years was bound to create some hype. But this album's rollout has been a scary masterclass in marketing and has managed to get everyone hyped up for its release, both lovers and haters.
Now, this is one of the more controversial verses that we've heard in a long time, and we haven't even heard it.
Like all good marketers, they've created a series of storylines for fans to get invested in, long before the project was even released. And like all good marketers, they've been a bit liberal with the truth.
Pusha to me is not a liar. I just think there has to be more to this than just this sentence.
But when you put all of the pieces together, which we'll do in this video, you can see why this rollout is arguably the greatest of this decade and one of the greatest in music history. Believe it or not, the album, which is scheduled to release on July 11, 2025, was more or less completed over a year prior. In June of 2024, Clips premiered a song during a Louis Vuitton fashion show in Paris. As many people know, Pharrell is the men's creative director at Louis Vuitton and produced the entire album at the LV headquarters. And this is one of the many narratives and storylines that have been weaved throughout the rollout of this Clips album. Clips and Pharrell all came from Virginia and are now in the fashion capital of the world, overlooking the river Seine and 5 minutes from the Louvre. It's about as high-end as you can get. And by August of 2024, Pusha T told the Ghetto Runways podcast that the album was done.
I'm so excited about this new Clips album.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I'm on right now.
Yeah.
It's absolutely finished. Just waiting on a feature. Man, I just created a masterpiece with my brother.
You did, man.
Like
so good.
Something
This
like
shit is
something
so good,
so
man.
crazy.
Yeah.
And it's like I just can't wait to present it.
By October, Clips signed to Def Jam, which Pusha T had already been signed to as a solo artist under the Good Music imprint. Pusha then left Good Music but was still under Def Jam through his label Airwave Music. Then in January of 2025, Pusha deleted all of his Instagram posts, which in recent history has come to mean that a new album is coming or some announcement is coming. In February, Pusha would also drop a snippet titled Mike Tyson Blow to the Face, which also generated some headlines. And in April, Pusha would send this ominous message out into the rap world.
It's a f***ing sicko, man. Look at this sicko, man. It's great, too. See? Big difference. When I'm smiling like that, that means that it's a big difference between me and you. Fuck y'all up, man. I can't wait. I'm gonna fuck y'all up. I hate y'all so bad. I hate y'all so bad.
On May 30th, the album was set to be titled Let God Sort 'Em Out, and the track Ace Trumpets was released. This song would introduce another storyline to the rollout, which was Pusha's fallout with Kanye West, who Pusha had to cut off because of a lot of personal issues he had with Ye, but many people felt like it was his rants. Here Pusha rapped, "Look at them, him and him, still waiting on Yeezy. I hope you got your squeegee. At your interviews, I just key, life's peachy." And whether it was intentional or not, Kanye's dream was to work at the men's creative director at Louis Vuitton, so the fact that this whole album is being recorded there could be another subtle diss. Kanye took the bait from this verse, but gave an uncharacteristically mature response. He tweeted, "I miss me and Pusha's friendship." But it was on June 2nd that hype for this album really started to gather momentum, and Pusha T definitely gave one of the most explosive hip-hop interviews in recent history. For this interview, Clips sat down with GQ's editor, Fraser Tharp. Pusha probably anticipated that he was going to be asked about Ye and gave him a very memorable backhanded compliment. He said, "He's a genius, and his intuition is even more genius level, right? But that's why me and him don't get along, because he sees through my fakeness with him. He knows I don't think he's a man." Pusha's beef with Jim Jones was also brought up, which stemmed from Jim Jones randomly saying that Pusha is not in the top 50 greatest ever rappers, and did multiple interviews dissing Pusha. This is a storyline that hasn't really been pushed for the Clips rollout, but it would definitely weaken Pusha T's reputation if he didn't address it. Pusha said, "After about the third interview, I promise you, I said, man, he must really want me to know what he thinks about me." The third storyline for this Clips rollout would involve Pusha's longtime beef with Drake. But what Thorpe probably didn't anticipate was that Pusha's beef with Drake had actually delayed the album by almost a year. Tharp wrote, If you expected the album last summer, the brothers sympathize. So did they. Then the article drops the bombshell that the label loved what they heard, except for Kendrick Lamar's guest verse on the thunderous Chains and Whips. The article explained that after a summer of beef between their two biggest artists that resulted in a still ongoing lawsuit from Drake, Def Jam's parent company UMG blanched at the antagonistic optics of two of Drake's biggest enemies linking on wax. Pusha was then quoted as saying, "They wanted me to ask Kendrick to censor his verse, which of course I was never doing, and then they wanted me to take the record off. And so, after a month of not doing it, Steve Gawley, the lawyer over there, was like, we'll just drop the clips. But that can't work because I'm still there, solo. But if you let us all go..." The shocking thing about it was that this verse was not explicitly dissing Drake. Later in the article it reads, Pusha calls their apprehension stupid, primarily because none of the bars in Kendrick's otherwise excellent verse could really be perceived as a shot or even subliminal. It does, however, contain the stellar line, "Therapy taught me how to open up. It also showed me I don't give a F." Pusha claimed that because of his history with Drake, he was also removed from the Pop Smoke's Paranoia song, which was also under UMG as the parent company. And when this interview was published, the main takeaway was that UMG tried to censor Kendrick Lamar from appearing on the album. And as you can imagine, a legendary label like Def Jam got a lot of pushback for allowing this to happen.
So
Def Jam should be ashamed of themselves. Okay, record labels censoring artists. What happened to my freedom of speech?
Def Jam. Def Jam has always been Def, D-E-A-F, Jam.
But was this actually what happened? As it would soon unfold, this would be true, but not the whole truth. In fact, this was all part of the clever framing and marketing behind this album. The following day, Billboard published an interview with Clips' manager, Steven Victor. Here, Victor claimed that Pusha T needed to pay a seven-figure sum to get out of his deal with Def Jam, and this revelation generated even more headlines. However, this interview did reveal that Def Jam really had nothing to do with censoring Kendrick. Victor said, UMG has this department where they review lyrics, so it was that department. The real reason that department is there is to protect the artist and the label from lawsuits for copyright infringement. They do it for all the labels. Some labels adhere to it closer than others. Victor alleges that the UMG review department really went beyond their remit to censor this verse. He said, let's say you interpolate somebody else's song. That department is there to make sure that the song is properly cleared. It's not meant to be like, you said XYZ about XYZ artists, so we're not going to release this music. Victor is not only Clips' manager, but is the label owner of Victor Victor, which Pop Smoke was signed to, and he explained the ways that UMG used their leverage to take Pusha T off the song. He said, what happened on the Pop Smoke song is that UMG thought he was dissing Drake on that song. He wasn't, but they thought he was. Pop Smoke was released on my label, and obviously I managed Pusha. So they came to me and said, we're not going to put this out now, unless you get Pusha to change these lyrics. Even though it has nothing to do with Pop Smoke. They're like, either he changes these lyrics or we're not putting the album out. Another juicy part of this interview is when Victor says something which contradicts what was said in the GQ interview. Pusha T wasn't dropped by Def Jam as a solo artist, but it was Pusha and his management's decision to leave as a solo artist too. Victor said, UMG's response was, how about you just find somewhere else to put out clips? Just pay something to us and put it out somewhere else. My thing was, we can't do that. Pusha and the clips are one thing. At this point, he clearly doesn't trust you guys. You guys haven't been good stewards of his career. This interview filled in some gaps raised by the GQ interview, but also raised some questions of its own. Every hip-hop blog and publication were pretty much talking about how UMG tried to censor Kendrick, but not every blog was taking this story at face value. In the aftermath of both of these interviews, several hip-hop and music blogs began to start poking holes in some of the aspects of this story that didn't add up. Rory from the Rory and Mal podcast argued that the line, therapy taught me how to open up, it also showed me I don't give a F, couldn't have been the only reason behind UMG wanting to remove the verse.
Pusha to me is not a liar. I just think there has to be more to this than just this sentence. Because why after a record that calls somebody on your label that word, would you be upset about or try to block a Clips and Kendrick song that doesn't talk about Drake whatsoever? Like, the damage was done.
Meanwhile, Ish from the Joe Budden podcast looked at it from his standpoint as a business owner.
And we in the middle of a potential 10-figure lawsuit against this man.
Yeah.
I'm going to proceed on the side of caution.
You're going to cost us money.
Yeah. They are already literally, supposedly, some billions is being tossed around as a potential settlement. I'm not playing them games. So you can feel how you want to feel on a sentimental side, but this is business.
Justin Hunt questioned why UMG would turn down a Clips reunion album because of one feature where Drake isn't even dissed.
This is a pretty slow year in rap music, all things considered. You mean you have a feature album coming with the biggest artists in the world, and they're all who's on your label, and you pass it up? This doesn't read to me. It doesn't read to me. I feel like there's more here.
On the Rap Latte podcast, King Green argued that Pusha T didn't pay the 7-figure sum to buy himself out of the contract, but the label was merely recouping some of the money they had already paid and getting it back.
Paying $1 million would be that you had to pay that. That's what you needed to recoup. That's what would make sense. Like, you owe us $1 million. That's why you have to pay the $1 million to get out of the deal, right? I feel like he either recouped, or that means he got a $1 million advance and he's returning that because he was going to put a record on a Def Jam and he was returning that.
The story had done its job of getting all of the hip-hop blogs talking about the album. But also, through this story, Clips have firmly positioned themselves on Kendrick's side of the Kendrick and Drake beef.
It gives him a sense of sympathy. If you are part of the pro-Kendrick, pro-hip-hop, anti-Drake movement, here's another part of that. Support the Clips and Pusha because they have been pushed out of their record deal by Drake.
But when you look at the Roc Nation deal, you can see how Clips have landed themselves with a good deal, and this deal in itself creates another layer of hype. Clips signing with Jay-Z's label led many people to put 2 and 2 together.
I would love to hear a whole verse on the new Clips album. That would be the cherry on top. I don't need it, but I would love to hear a whole verse.
And, I mean, not to start the rumor mill up again, will it be a whole verse on there?
Signing to Roc Nation is also another way for Pusha T and Jay-Z to get back at Ye. Jay-Z has also fallen out with Kanye for close to a decade now, but Kanye has really refused to move on. In March of 2025, Kanye tweeted some disgusting things about Jay-Z's kids and suggested they have special needs and used some would call, outdated term beginning with an R and ending with a "atarded" to describe them. But there were also commercial reasons behind Clips choosing Roc Nation. Brian Zasuk, the founder of the streaming service Audiomack, broke down this deal on Twitter and said, "Most distribution companies like Roc Nation take a small cut of artist profits in exchange for basic services like delivery to stores and platforms, royalty collection and payouts, accounting, reporting, and rights management." In this thread, he also wrote, "Roc Nation offers artists flexibility through its distribution model. This approach is especially beneficial for veteran acts like Clips that have already benefited from the marketing and exposure provided by their previous major label partners. But it's clear that Clips are getting some sort of help with the marketing and promotion, as both Clips and Pusha T are generally not known for major rollouts in the past. It looks as if Roc Nation are helping, but Clips are also working really hard to push the album too." Zasuk would later tweet, "The most critical part of any album rollout is the artist's full commitment. Without it, even the best plans fall flat. Some labels can't even get their artists to accept an IG collab post. Clips are putting in overtime." On June 17th, another storyline would be introduced into the fold and contained a beef that seemed to be completely out of the blue. In fact, this next diss was so confusing that people assumed it was for another person. The second full track to be dropped was So Be It, but rather cleverly, Pusha wrote this verse to make people think that on first listen, this was about Kanye.
When the Clips put out So Be It, I felt like a hip-hop novice because at the end of So Be It, which I think is incredible, by the way, I think the clips are 2 for 2. The visual is incredible as well. I thought Pusha T was dissing Kanye West.
On the song, Pusha rap, "You cried in front of me, you died in front of me. Calabasas took your chick and your pride in front of me." Kanye is known for owning a home in Calabasas and had a well-documented fallout with his ex-wife Kim Kardashian, of whom at the time was dating Pete Davidson, who was living there. But this line was a deliberate red herring. Shortly after the song's release, Fraser Tharp published another article on GQ titled "Pusha T Explains Why He Has Words for Travis Scott," which explained that Pusha had not dissed Ye, but Travis. And this, by Clips and GQ and possibly Roc Nation, was a marketing masterpiece where Thorpe had saved Pusha's quotes about Travis Scott from the earlier interview and released them after this song. In this article, Pusha said, "We were in Paris, literally working, and he was calling to play P his new album. He came to Pharrell's studio. He interrupted a session. He sees me and Malice there. He's like, 'Oh man, everybody's here.' He's smiling, laughing, jumping around, doing his effing monkey dance. We weren't into the music, but he wanted to play it. Wanted to film us and Pharrell listening to it. And then a week later, you hear Meltdown, which he didn't play. He played the song, but not Drake's verse. On this song, Drake rapped about Push's new album and said, "Heard your new joint, it's embarrassing-ish." Drake then talked about how he had bought Pharrell's iconic jewelry at an auction and now planned to melt it down. Pharrell was hired by Louis Vuitton in the aftermath of Ye's fashion partner Virgil Abloh passing away from cancer, and Drake dissed Pharrell further with the line, "Since V not around, the members done hung up the Louis, they not even wearing that ish." It's since been argued that Drake sent in his verse late, so Travis was playing Pharrell what he had at the time, and the Drake verse was added later. This is evident by the fact that the song Meltdown didn't appear on the original pressing of Utopia, but obviously Travis still shouldn't have released the song. Other people have argued that Travis didn't know that Pharrell was being dissed, but it's strange that Travis visited Pharrell in Louis Vuitton's headquarters and didn't know that it was about him. Whatever way you want to spin it, Travis really messed up, and Pusha didn't hold back on this verse and subsequent interviews. One of the more cryptic lines about Travis is the line, "But I got the video, I can share and AE it." This is a line about Travis's fight with Tyga's manager, AE, and the word share is because AE was dating the singer Cher. Pusha is quite aware that people on the internet will decode these hidden meanings and will generate even more talk and think pieces about the song. The song would also force even academics to take note as well.
Travis, don't let these talk to you like that. Hold on, let me gaslight him for a second. Travis, don't let motherfucking Pusha T talk to you like that. I went to your concert. You number 2 performer in the whole hip hop. What these niggas talk to you about? You doing stadiums. You doing bodegas. You doing festivals. This nigga's doing airplane bathrooms. Don't let these niggas talk to you like that, Travis.
Shortly after So Be It was released, Pusha T would appear on the New York Times podcast. And bear in mind that this rollout is not coming through hip-hop publications, but through GQ, through the New York Times, and through Paris fashion shows. And this is all very deliberate.
Doing the New York Times, even though I'd obviously rather have them come talk to us and tell us these stories, it places it in a different place.
Yes.
This is not just some hip-hop shit. Like, no, we're going to go sit with art critics, and we're going to tell an entire story about this.
This could be Clips taking a leaf out of Jay-Z's book, where Jay-Z famously had the Picasso video featured alongside artists like Marina Abramovic and George Kondo, among others, and placed hip-hop alongside what is largely considered high art. The album artwork was created by the artist Cause, who has a similar trajectory as Clips, who started off as a graffiti artist in New York and is now viewed as a prestigious contemporary artist. He also designed the artwork for Kanye's 808s and Heartbreak and Clips' 2009 album Till the Casket Drops. During Clips' New York Times interview, Pusha would double down on his comments on Travis, but he would also make some interesting statements about UMG and Def Jam trying to censor Kendrick's verse. When asked about the fallout with UMG, Pusha said,
they didn't like the in my opinion, they didn't like the optics
of 2 Drake foes teaming up.
And Justin Hunt thought that the phrase, "in my opinion," was very revealing.
Right, so he was very vigilant initially that it was because of Drake and it was Def Jam, and they didn't like the fact that the optics were crazy. They didn't like what Kendrick said in the verse because Kendrick's talking about Drake, right? It softened a little bit. If you listen to him again right here, he says, in his opinion. That's a very different thing.
And the lawyers didn't actually single out Drake, but about something different.
They pinpointed a line where the phrase Trump card was used, right? And it's so stupid. Like, it's like the phrase Trump card was used, and they said that they didn't want any problem with Trump or something like that.
So this is all reasonable speculation from Pusha rather than anything concrete. In the build-up to Trump's second election, you saw many business leaders like Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg trying to placate Trump before he got elected. UMG might have similarly adopted the position of not doing anything that would upset Drake for the foreseeable future. But the very same day that this full interview was published, Kendrick's verse was leaked, and people started to make their own mind up on whether this verse should have been censored. On June 20th, Pharrell hosted an album listening party on the rooftop of Louis Vuitton's headquarters, overlooking the river and the Paris skyline. 3 days later, footage of this event was leaked to TMZ.
And what you're going to hear tonight is from Virginia to Paris, Paris to Virginia. You're going to hear that energy tonight.
And this footage contained Kendrick's verse. This verse did not specifically mention Drake or the things that he had been accused of, but like many Kendrick verses, there are cryptic lines that could be aimed at Drake. But if Drake is a 6 god and your opening 8 bars are saying, I sent him back to the cosmic, yeah. This verse was subsequently deleted from most social media platforms and taken down as copyright. The most innocent explanation was that the audio quality was bad and wasn't presented the way that it was intended.
I hate hearing music when it's not presented the way the artist wants us to hear it.
So
Context matters, and that
stupid.
sound quality was terrible.
But knowing what we know already about this rollout, all of these copyright strikes and legal takedowns could have been part of the strategy and add to the narrative that this Kendrick verse is what the industry doesn't want you listening to. And just when this whole rollout almost seemed too difficult to keep up with, a reference track was released exposing Ye. This featured Pusha T rapping the song Life of the Party, which Kanye would later use on his 2021 album Donda. This was leaked by a songwriter named Gage, who, as it turns out, has Roc Nation mentioned in his Twitter bio. A few hours later, another account would release Pusha T doing a reference for Ye's song Off the Grid. And similarly to UMG censoring Kendrick, there was a bit more to the story. Another user would come to Ye's defense and argue that Pusha didn't write this song himself, but had polished up a freestyle already written by Ye. Reference tracks often work where people update earlier drafts and so on, and are often not just simply someone taking someone else's song. Also, it should be pointed out that these reference tracks were mysteriously not taken down for copyright, like the leaks of Kendrick's verse. It's unclear whether any more hype or promotion would be released leading up to the final days before it's dropped, but the only thing for certain is that it's not really needed. If a specific person at Roc Nation has been behind this rollout, they deserve more than a promotion. If Pusha T has been behind it, then he should definitely have a similar role like he did as president of Good Music, where he was looking after other artists. If it was Fraser Tharp's idea to drip feed information from the GQ interview, then he deserves his credit as well. Whatever the case, hopefully this album lives up to the excitement.